I don't play games, and I sure as hell don't let anyone mess with me, especially not when it comes to work. If you ask anyone in the company, they'll tell you that Monica Donnelly doesn't back down from a fight, whether it's a high-stakes deal or a disagreement over the last cup of coffee in the break room. My department? It runs like a well-oiled machine, and I'm the engine, the gears, and the oil, all rolled into one. I built my empire here, from the ground up, and I wasn't about to let some charming, smug-faced guy who just came back from studying abroad tell me what to do. When they told me Luther Blackwood would be taking over as general manager, I almost choked on my lunch. Luther. The same Luther I spent my childhood fighting with? The guy who always thought he was the smartest one in the room, the one who could talk his way out of anything and had an ego the size of a football field? Yeah, that Luther. And now, suddenly, he's the boss of me? No way. Luther, the general manager. No freaking way. Hey you. Welcome to Cupidoops, where love and logic are officially divorced, and chaos has full custody. Chaos begins. Chapter 1. Now, let's talk about Luther for a minute. Luther Blackwood. With his dark, neatly styled hair, perfectly pressed suit, and those signature silver-framed glasses, he looked every bit the part of a corporate powerhouse. The guy was handsome in a way that made people turn their heads when he walked into a room. And let's not even get started on the smile that made women swoon. But here's the thing, looks aren't everything, right? Sure, Luther had a way of making people feel like they were the most important person in the world. He had this charm that could make anyone do his bidding, even without saying a word. But I wasn't fooled by that. I'd known him long enough to know what lay beneath the surface. A deeply competitive, overly confident, sometimes insufferable man who always thought he had the upper hand. When he returned from his years of studying abroad, the company had high hopes. He was the golden boy, the prodigal son, coming back to save the day. I had no idea what kind of game he thought he was playing, but I was about to teach him a lesson. Our first meeting together as colleagues was a disaster waiting to happen. We were seated at the long conference table, the room filled with the usual suspects, managers, assistants, and a few department heads. But it felt like the air between Luther and me was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The tension was palpable. Luther, sitting at the head of the table, gave everyone his signature "I'm the boss" smile. "All right, team," he began. "Let's make this a productive meeting. I want us to be better, faster, stronger." I rolled my eyes so hard I almost gave myself whiplash. Better, faster, stronger? Was he serious? As if he had the magic touch to fix everything overnight. "Actually," I interrupted before he could continue, "we've been running things just fine here, Luther. I don't need you to come in and start throwing around fancy words. We have a system, and it works." Luther's eyebrows shot up, and a chuckle escaped from his lips. "Oh, I'm aware, Monica. But let's not pretend everything is perfect, shall we? We both know there's room for improvement." The room went dead silent. It was like everyone could feel the electricity in the air. People shifted in their seats, unsure whether to step in or just watch the show unfold. But this was my territory. I wasn't about to let him waltz in and make me feel small. "I've been running this department long before you even thought about returning to this country," I said, my voice cool, but my words sharp. "And I don't need a lecture from you on how to improve. I know exactly what's wrong, and what's right." Luther smiled that infuriatingly smug smile. "Well, it's cute that you think you have it all under control. But let's see what happens when we start working together, shall we?" His words hung in the air like a challenge. I felt my blood pressure spike, but I wasn't going to back down. Not from him. Not from anyone. After that meeting, I knew one thing for sure: this was a war. A battle of wits, power, and will. And I was ready. I wasn't about to let Luther get away with trying to undermine my authority, especially after all the work I'd put into building my career. I knew exactly what I needed to do: outsmart him at every turn. I spent the next few days meticulously planning my counterattacks. First, I made sure to take charge of every meeting, keeping Luther on the sidelines where I could control the conversation. I started flooding his inbox with urgent reports that he had to read, distracting him from his larger goals. Every time he tried to assert himself, I was one step ahead. The thing about Luther is, he's so used to people just doing what he says. He's never had someone challenge him, especially not me. But I was ready to show him that being the boss isn't just about having the title. It's about earning respect, and I wasn't about to hand that over without a fight. But of course, Luther wasn't one to just sit back and take it. No, he had his own plans. I knew he was trying to ruffle my feathers, but I wasn't going to let him succeed. He started calling impromptu meetings, overriding my authority without even asking. He'd walk into my office unannounced, his silver glasses gleaming in the light, his trademark smile plastered on his face as if he owned the place. "You know, Monica," he said one afternoon, "I think it's time for us to really work together. You know, on a project. We could accomplish a lot if we just put aside the egos." I raised an eyebrow. "And whose ego are we putting aside, exactly?" He chuckled, his grin never fading. "Both of ours. If we stop fighting, we can actually make something great happen." But the truth was, I wasn't interested in making anything great happen with Luther. All I wanted was to show him that I wasn't some puppet he could manipulate. We continued to clash, each moment filled with tension and sarcasm. I'd watch him try to charm people into agreeing with him, and I'd counter every argument with cold, logical precision. Luther's charm was effective in the short term, but when it came to the nitty-gritty work, I was the one who got results. And I wasn't going to let him forget that. By the end of that first week, it was clear we were both just as stubborn as the other. He'd been doing his best to push my buttons, but I'd been pushing right back. It was like we were playing a game of chess, each move calculated and strategic. But then something happened. It wasn't just the rivalry anymore. It was personal. For the first time in years, I was starting to feel something else. It wasn't admiration, not yet, anyway, but it was something close. Something I didn't want to admit, not to him, and not to myself. For now, though, I kept my distance. I refused to acknowledge whatever strange pull I felt when he was around. I was too busy building my empire, too focused on keeping my position secure to deal with any feelings. Besides, there was no room for emotions in this war. But even in the midst of all the fighting, I couldn't help but wonder, was this battle something deeper than just office politics? Chapter 2. The tension in the office had become so thick you could cut it with a knife. If there was a way to make the rivalry between Luther and me more obvious, I wasn't sure what it was. Our battles, often subtle, sometimes not so much, had become the backdrop of every meeting, every decision, and every conversation. Luther's charm and silver-framed glasses were everywhere, but I wasn't about to let him steal my thunder. I was the department head, after all. But what I hadn't anticipated was the wild card that was about to be thrown into this already explosive equation. My assistant, Carrie. Enter Carrie, the chaos creator. Carrie was everything you'd expect from an assistant, if that assistant lived for chaos and gossip. She was energetic, quick-witted, and had an uncanny ability to overhear everything that was ever said in the office. I wasn't sure whether she had superhuman hearing or whether she just had a knack for inserting herself into situations where she was never invited, but it was her greatest strength and her most annoying flaw. Her desk was located a mere 2 feet from mine, and as soon as she started her shift, it was like a storm hit. The office was flooded with the latest gossip, ridiculous theories, and wild speculations. "Did you hear?" she whispered to me one morning as I poured my coffee, her eyes wide and full of drama. "I heard Luther's been secretly meeting with the finance team to change the budget for next quarter. Think he's trying to take over your projects." I rolled my eyes, ignoring her as I opened my laptop. "Carrie, it's called collaboration. Not everything is a conspiracy." "But wouldn't it be fun if it was?" she said with a smirk, clearly entertained by her own commentary. While Carrie's gossiping could sometimes make me laugh, it usually led to some very awkward moments at the office. Take, for example, the time she overheard Luther talking to one of the sales managers and immediately spread the rumor that they were planning a secret undercover mission to rebrand the department without telling me. All of a sudden, the entire office was in an uproar, and I had to deal with that before getting any real work done. Of course, Carrie just stood there watching, loving every second of it. But none of this compared to what happened during a project meeting that was supposed to go off without a hitch. That was where everything went south, and fast. It was a big day. We were meeting with a few key clients to pitch a project worth millions, and I had prepared meticulously. I had the entire presentation down to the smallest detail. There was no room for error. No distractions. My department had worked tirelessly for weeks, and I was ready to make sure everyone saw that we were the best at what we did. Luther, naturally, had his own ideas. As usual, He decided to stroll into the meeting with that charming smile plastered on his face, acting like he had all the answers. The tension between us was palpable, but I wasn't going to let it get in the way of getting this deal done. Unfortunately, the universe had other plans. Right in the middle of my detailed presentation, the world shifted. I could feel it coming, the unmistakable, all-consuming signal that my monthly cycle was about to make its dramatic entrance. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Suddenly, the room felt too hot. The edges of my vision blurred. I tried to keep my focus on the screen, but my body had other ideas. Carrie, who had been sitting across the table from me, noticed it first. She shot me a worried glance, but I waved it off, trying to pretend everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. I had a crisis on my hands. It was bad enough that I was already dealing with Luther's smirking face as he tried to take over the meeting, but now I had to somehow get through it without embarrassing myself. The room seemed to get smaller, and I could feel my face growing hotter by the second. I shifted in my seat, trying to hold it together, but then it happened. The worst thing imaginable. As I stood to point to a chart on the screen, I realized, too late, that my stomach was no longer cooperating. The red warning sign had appeared, and I could feel everything happening at once. My face turned beet red, and I quickly sat back down, hoping no one noticed. Carrie had already caught on, and I saw the brief flash of panic in her eyes. "Monica, are you okay?" Luther asked, his voice laced with concern, though I knew him well enough to see the hint of amusement lurking beneath it. He had this uncanny ability to notice when things weren't going according to plan, and of course, he wasn't about to let me off the hook. "I'm fine," I muttered, doing my best to hold it together. "Just a little, off today." But Luther wasn't convinced. Of course, he wasn't. Luther to the rescue? Somehow, Luther Blackwood, the man I had been constantly at war with for the past few weeks, was suddenly offering to help me. The man who couldn't resist poking fun at my every move during meetings was now, genuinely concerned. "Carrie," he said, his voice low enough for only Carrie to hear, "why don't you get Monica a few things? I think she needs some fresh air." Carrie, clearly torn between her loyalty to me and her growing curiosity about the situation, nodded quickly and darted out of the room. I could see the gears turning in her head, no doubt planning on turning this moment into another piece of office gossip for later. But then, just as I thought I could breathe again, Luther did something I wasn't prepared for. He stood and walked toward me with a strange mix of professionalism and teasing. "You know," he said in a tone I didn't know how to interpret, "I'm pretty sure there's a supply closet around here somewhere. Let me guess, the emergency stash." I tried to shoot him a glare, but it only made him smile. That smile. The one that had always driven me crazy. Now it was somehow a little less maddening and a lot more sympathetic. I stared at him, my brain trying to make sense of what was happening. Luther Blackwood was helping me, with my monthly cycle crisis, of all things. He was being kind, but there was a definite undertone of teasing in his voice. "You're ridiculous," I muttered, shaking my head. "You can't seriously think this is funny." "I'm not laughing," he said with a chuckle. "I'm offering assistance." I felt my face flush again. This was the worst possible thing that could happen at a critical meeting, and of course, Luther had to witness the whole thing. But to my surprise, Luther didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't shame me or make it worse. Instead, he handled it with an odd kind of respect. As Carrie returned with the necessary supplies, thankfully, without making a scene, Luther gave me a sly wink and returned to his seat at the head of the table, as if nothing had happened. He didn't even mention the awkward moment again. Instead, he dove right back into the project details, seamlessly taking over where I had left off. It was almost as if he was saying, "I've got this, no need to worry." The rest of the meeting felt like a blur. All I could focus on was the fact that Luther had somehow managed to handle the situation with ease and grace, and with no more teasing than I could handle. It wasn't what I had expected, and I definitely wasn't prepared for the way it made me feel. As the meeting wrapped up and everyone began to shuffle out, Carrie pulled me aside. "You two are something else," she said with a grin. "There's definitely more to you two than just a rivalry." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help the smirk that crept onto my face. "Don't start, Carrie. Seriously." But deep down, something was changing. The wall I'd built between Luther and me, brick by brick, was starting to crack, just a little. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. Chapter 3. The rivalry between Luther and me wasn't just something that developed overnight. Oh no. It had been brewing for years, since we were kids, back when we were barely old enough to realize that what we were doing was anything other than just a normal sibling-like competition. It was strange. In a way, we were both born into the same storm, two heads of the same crazy dragon, and ever since then, we had just been fighting over who could tame it first. Before I knew him as the annoyingly perfect general manager, Luther had been my worst enemy, and in some ways, I had been his. Flashback to our early days of warfare. The first memory that comes to mind is from elementary school. We were both in the same class, separated by just a year, and somehow, we were always paired up for projects. And, naturally, we could never agree on anything. There was this one project that still makes me laugh when I think about it. An art project for the annual school fair. We were supposed to build a model of a historical landmark. It was meant to be something simple, something that allowed us to demonstrate our creativity. But for Luther and me, it was not that simple. The first thing we did was argue over which landmark to choose. Luther wanted to do the Eiffel Tower because he had this ridiculous obsession with France and all things fancy, while I was adamant about doing the Great Wall of China because, well, I thought it was way cooler and more badass. I mean, come on, a wall that spans an entire country? It practically screamed power. We argued for hours. Luther sat there, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips as he casually shut down every suggestion I made. It wasn't so much about the project itself. It was the fact that he could never let me win. I think the Eiffel Tower would be better, Monica, he said with that infuriating calmness of his, raising an eyebrow as if he was delivering an ultimatum. It's more elegant, and everyone loves it. I glared at him. The Great Wall is better, I shot back. It's a symbol of strength and endurance. You know, like me. We both stood there, stubborn as mules, each determined that our choice was the right one. Of course, it ended in a compromise. We picked both. Luther did the Eiffel Tower, and I tackled the Great Wall. The result was a sloppy, mismatched display that didn't showcase our talents, just our egos. But it didn't matter. The project wasn't about the grade. It was about who couldn't let the other one win. Our childhood was a blur of these kinds of antics, endless pranks, fierce competitions, and a constant battle for superiority. Every time we crossed paths, we were at each other's throats. Whether it was over who got to sit at the best seat in class, you know, the window sit facing the Greenie School compound, or who could answer the most questions in CLSSS, we were always competing. And the pranks? They were legendary. There was the time I managed to sneak into his room and replace all his school books with my own, covered in doodles and inappropriate cartoons that would have gotten him in trouble had anyone seen them. But the most memorable prank wasn't even something I did. No, it was something he did to me, something that I still had to laugh at, even though it made me seethe back then. I had just gotten this beautiful, expensive watch for my birthday, and I wore it everywhere. Luther, being the annoying creature he was, decided to play a little game. He took it when I wasn't looking and swapped it out with a cheap knockoff he had gotten from some random store. He told everyone that I'd been duped into buying a fake. I didn't find out until the next day when I noticed the clasp didn't work quite right, and upon closer inspection, I realized it was not the watch my parents had gifted me. That little move of his, oh, I was furious. The fact that he was the one to pull it off just made it worse. But then, just as I was about to blow up at him, he gave me that signature smirk of his. "Nice watch," he said. "Looks great on you." I had to admit, there was something about his smugness that always made me feel like I had to get him back, but I never could. He was always one step ahead. And then, of course, there was the incident with the sugar. To this day, I can't decide if I should be furious about it or just laugh. It all started when I made a batch of cookies, my famous chocolate chip ones. I had spent hours perfecting the recipe, making sure the batter was just right. The whole house smelled like vanilla and chocolate, and I was so proud of them. But, apparently, Luther had decided that my victory needed to be tested. I had left the sugar bowl out on the kitchen counter while I went to check on something, and when I returned, there was Luther, grinning from ear to ear. Of course, I didn't suspect a thing at first. It wasn't until I tasted the first cookie that I realized something was horribly, terribly wrong. My throat almost seized up from the overwhelming taste of salt instead of sugar. I blinked, staring down at the plate. "What the hell did you do to these?" I yelled, spinning around to face him. Luther, standing by the kitchen door with his arms casually crossed, looked at me with an expression that could only be described as pure mischief. "I didn't do anything," he said innocently, as if he were the picture of innocence. I looked down at the salt-riddled cookies and then back at him, my blood boiling. "You switched the sugar with salt." He shrugged nonchalantly. "I thought the cookies could use a little seasoning," he said with a smirk. I'm not even sure how I didn't just strangle him right there. But that's the kind of thing that made it impossible to ever truly hate him. Because, as much as it pissed me off, I couldn't help but admire his creativity. As we got older, though, something strange started happening. Luther started to change. He wasn't the annoying little brat anymore. His teasing became a little less about rivalry and a little more about something else. I began to notice that whenever I walked into a room, his eyes would linger just a little too long, or he'd make these little comments that seemed less like insults and more like compliments. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, who could blame him? I was undeniably the most brilliant person he had ever met, right? Surely, the reason he kept picking fights with me was because he respected me on some deep, personal level. The thought that there was more to it, that he was, in fact, crushing on me, had never crossed my mind. But looking back now, all the signs were there. The teasing that had once felt like playful competition started to carry an underlying tension, a certain weight that I never acknowledged. For example, the way he always made sure we were seated next to each other in class, despite our constant bickering. Or how, whenever we went to family gatherings, he'd somehow managed to accidentally show up right where I was, looking casual, but with that ever-present glint in his eyes. I caught him staring at me more than once, but every time I turned to ask what he was looking at, he'd just flash that infuriating smile and shrug it off. But it wasn't until that last summer before he left for boarding school that I began to wonder if there was something more to it. I remember it clearly, just a few days before his departure. We were at the family barbecue. As usual, everyone gathered around the fire, talking about how his absence was going to affect the family dynamics. That was when I saw it. He was standing just a few feet away, talking to my cousin. He had a weird look on his face, almost like he was nervous. I thought I imagined it, but then I caught him looking at me from the corner of my eye, his gaze intense, as if he was looking at me differently. That was the day it hit me. Luther, my childhood rival, did he had a crush on me? I tried to shake it off. After all, we had spent years tormenting each other. He had to be joking, right? There was no way someone like him could possibly have real feelings for me. But looking back, I could see all the subtle signs. The way he treated me when no one else was looking, how he always had to have the last word in our arguments, and how, despite everything, he never really seemed to hate me. Not in the way a normal rival would. But life was never that simple. Luther was moving abroad. And as he left, we both left behind more than just a shared rivalry. There was unfinished business. No matter how much we fought, there was something in the air that both of us ignored until it was too late. Back to the present. And now, here we were again, back in the same city. Same rivalry. Same bickering. But something had changed. I could sense it in the way Luther looked at me during meetings, the way his smile lingered just a little too long, like he was trying to figure me out. And I couldn't shake this strange feeling that all our years of fighting, all of the pranks and schemes, were just the surface of something deeper, something that neither of us had been brave enough to face back then. As much as I hated to admit it, Luther wasn't just my childhood rival anymore. He was something more complicated. And I had no idea what to do with that. Chapter 4. It was just another ordinary day at the office. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead was the only sound cutting through the air, save for the low murmur of voices in the open-plan workspace. Everyone was busy at their desks, glued to their computer screens, minds focused on the mountain of work that seemed to grow exponentially with every passing day. But even in this sea of productivity, one thing stood out. Someone was stirring the pot. Enter Jessica, the classic green tea bitch. I remember the first time I saw her walk into the office. It was like something out of a bad drama. Her long hair bounced as she sauntered in, the "I'm so cute and innocent" act already in full swing. She smiled brightly at everyone, said hello like she was the Queen of England, and instantly set about trying to make herself the center of attention. At first glance, she seemed sweet, like a puppy dog who just wanted to be petted. But we all know that looks can be deceiving. I knew from the moment she set foot in the office, she wasn't the harmless little thing she appeared to be. Luther, of course, was immediately charmed by her. I rolled my eyes. Typical. Jessica didn't waste any time planting herself right next to him. She made a point of speaking with him in the break room, always laughing a little too loudly at his jokes and leaning in just a bit too close. And Luther? Well, he was eating it up. He always had a soft spot for women who fluttered their eyelashes in his direction. Honestly, if I were as fake and sugary sweet as she was, I could have probably had him wrapped around my finger by now. But I wasn't the type to play those games. And I didn't have time to compete with some office flirt who was pretending to be everyone's best friend while secretly trying to climb over them. I had my own shit to deal with. But then it happened. One afternoon, I was sitting at my desk, going through some reports for the new project, when Jessica's voice pierced through the air like a knife. "Monica, can I talk to you for a second?" Her tone was unusually soft, and there was a hint of something in her voice that made my skin crawl. I glanced up from my computer screen. "What's up?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She took a deep breath and sat down across from me, folding her hands in front of her as if we were about to have a heart-to-heart. The picture of innocence. "I know you're probably busy, but I just wanted to let you know something," she began, her voice low and shaky. "I don't want to make things awkward at work, but I just wanted you to know that, well, I've been feeling a little bullied by you." At first, I blinked, completely taken aback by her words. Did I hear her right? Bullied? By me? I almost laughed in her face. "What?" I said, still trying to process what I had just heard. "Yeah, it's just that sometimes, the way you speak to me, it feels a little harsh," she continued, her voice getting softer as if she was sharing a dark secret. "I'm really sensitive, you know? And I just wanted to let you know that it's been affecting me." A surge of disbelief coursed through me. Bullied? Was she serious? What kind of twisted version of reality was she living in? I couldn't even remember a single moment when I had been rude to her. I was professional. I was busy. Hell, I barely spoke to her outside of work-related matters. But Jessica, with her perfect little puppy dog eyes, was pulling off a performance so convincing, even I was starting to question myself. The tears in her eyes seemed almost real, but there was no way in hell I was buying into this. Not for a second. Still, I forced a smile. "I'm sorry if anything I said made you feel that way. I'll be more mindful in the future," I said, playing along for the sake of peace. She nodded, looking like she had just won the sympathy lottery. "Thanks, Monica. I really appreciate it," she said, flashing a fake smile before getting up and walking away. I sat there for a moment, staring at my computer screen in disbelief. The audacity of this girl. The nerve. She didn't even try to hide it. She was manipulating everyone in the office, and now, I was the villain in her little narrative. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was playing the victim. It was textbook. The quiet, sweet girl who everyone adored, who would never hurt a fly, being bullied by the big, bad boss lady. It was a classic power play, and it worked every time. People would start to feel sorry for her, and soon, no one would question her. No one would think to ask the hard questions. It was brilliant in its simplicity. And Luther. Well, he was all too eager to step in and play the knight in shining armor. The very next day, Luther called me into his office. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Monica, I wanted to talk to you about something," he began, his voice unusually stern. I raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" He hesitated before speaking, clearly uncomfortable. "It's about Jessica. She came to me, and, well, she said she's been feeling bullied by you. I'm not saying I believe her, but I wanted to make sure we keep the atmosphere here respectful." I bit my lip, holding back a laugh that was threatening to escape. Was he seriously buying into this? Jessica had him wrapped around her little finger. "Are you kidding me?" I asked, incredulous. "Luther, I've done nothing but treat her like any other colleague. I don't know what she's talking about, but this is ridiculous." Luther shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I know you wouldn't do that intentionally, Monica, but she's really upset, and we need to look out for each other here." I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to snap back. "Luther, she's playing you. She's faking it. You can't be serious about this." But Luther, being the ever-charming fool, just nodded, as if agreeing with me, but still seemed uncertain. It was like he was trying to balance his trust in me with his newfound sympathy for Jessica. I was so angry I could have screamed. This was the perfect storm. Jessica had made her move, and Luther had taken the bait hook, line, and sinker. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. I caught wind of what Jessica had been doing behind the scenes. She wasn't just crying to Luther. No, she was spreading rumors all over the office, whispering behind closed doors about how I was a bully and how I made her feel small and worthless. People were starting to believe it. Some were even giving me the side eye in the hallways. I was livid. So, I decided to play my own game. One day, I asked Jessica to meet me for lunch. She agreed without hesitation, clearly thinking I was about to apologize. But what she didn't know was that I had a little surprise for her. As we sat down at the cafe, I leaned in, my eyes locking with hers. "You know, Jessica," I said, my voice cool and composed, "I've been hearing some interesting things about you lately. Some rumors. About you not being entirely truthful about our little situation." Her eyes widened, but she tried to cover it with a nervous laugh. "What do you mean?" I smiled, letting the words hang in the air before dropping the bomb. "I heard you've been telling people that I've been bullying you. Funny, because the only person I've seen bullying anyone around here is you." Her face drained of color, and I could see the panic rising in her eyes. She wasn't expecting this. Not one bit. I continued, "It's cute how you've been playing the victim. But you're not fooling anyone, Jessica. Your little scheme is about to blow up in your face, and when it does, I'll be there to make sure the truth comes out." For a moment, she just stared at me, speechless. Then, like a cornered animal, she finally spoke. "You wouldn't. You can't." I leaned back, smirking. "Try me." The rest of the lunch passed in tense silence. Jessica clearly knew she had crossed the line, and now, the tables had turned. I didn't need to prove anything, I just needed to watch her self-destruct. And self-destruct she did. It didn't take long before the office started to realize what a fraud she really was. One by one, people started coming forward with their own stories that painted Jessica in a very different light. The truth was out. And Jessica? She was left with nothing but egg on her face. Luther, too, couldn't deny what had happened anymore. He was pissed, and rightly so. He had been played, and now, he had to face the consequences of his misplaced trust. It was almost satisfying. Almost. As for Jessica, well, she got exactly what she deserved. She was reassigned to a different department and pretty much ostracized by everyone. The only thing left for her was to pack up her things and slink away with her tail between her legs. And as for me, I just had to sit back and watch as everything came crashing down. Chapter 5. The celebration was inevitable. After months of grueling work, high-stakes meetings, and sleepless nights, our company had finally secured the million-dollar project, the kind of contract that didn't just elevate the company's status, but solidified our positions for years to come. This wasn't just a win. It was the win. And of course, what better way to celebrate than an extravagant office party? The kind where HR conveniently turned a blind eye to excessive drinking, and for one night, everyone pretended to be best friends. Despite my usual reluctance to attend office parties, even I, Monica, the ever-serious, no-nonsense department head, couldn't argue against celebrating a victory this massive. By Friday evening, the entire office had abandoned their desks and flocked to one of the city's high-end lounges, a place where champagne flowed like water and exclusivity dripped from every corner. The music pulsed through the walls, laughter echoed across the room, and for the first time in a long while, the usual tensions of the workplace melted into a collective sense of triumph. I arrived a little later than most, dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged my curves just right. It wasn't too revealing, but it sent a message: I was here to celebrate, not work. The moment I stepped inside, my assistant, Carrie, shoved a drink into my hand. "You have to let loose tonight," she said with a smirk. "We worked our asses off for this. One drink won't kill you." One drink turned into 2. Then 3. Before I knew it, I was laughing at jokes I usually found annoying, tolerating conversations I would normally roll my eyes at, and, dare I say it, having fun. And then there was Luther. The thorn in my side. The man who had been my rival, my headache, my constant challenge in the office. He stood near the bar, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, the top buttons of his shirt undone, his silver-framed glasses catching the dim club lights. He always carried himself with that maddening confidence, but tonight, there was something different. Something more relaxed. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the victory, or maybe it was the way his gaze lingered on me a second too long. I walked toward the bar to refill my glass. "You're late," he noted as I approached the bar, handing me a drink. I smirked. Fashionably. His lips twitched in amusement. And just like that, the night took a turn I never saw coming. The drinks kept flowing. The conversation between us, usually laced with tension and sarcasm, felt different. It was still a battle of wits, but there was an underlying charge to it, something simmering just beneath the surface. By midnight, the party was in full swing. The music was louder, the dancing wilder, and the drinks? Well, they had long since taken over the night. Luther and I ended up outside, away from the noise. The cool night air was sobering but not enough to erase the haze between us. "I should go home," I murmured, though I made no move to actually leave. "I'll walk you to your car," Luther offered, his voice lower than usual. I should have said no. I should have left. But I didn't. The walk to my car was silent, thick with unspoken words. Every brush of our arms sent little jolts through me, and when we reached my car, I turned to him, ready to say something, anything, to break the tension. But before I could, he spoke first. "Monica." His voice was soft, almost hesitant. I should have opened my car door and driven away. But I didn't. And then it happened. Luther kissed me. Or maybe I kissed him. All I knew was that 1 second, we were standing there, staring at each other, and the next, his lips were on mine, firm, demanding, perfect. Heat exploded between us. I should have pushed him away. I should have stopped this before it started. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned in. My hands found his shirt, gripping the fabric like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The kiss was a challenge, just like everything else between us. Hot, intense, a battle neither of us wanted to lose. I didn't even register when we moved. The next thing I knew, we were in a car, not my car, and the city lights blurred past in a drunken haze. And then, black. I woke up with a pounding headache and an unfamiliar weight pressing against my body. The sheets beneath me were too soft. The scent surrounding me, woodsy, clean, familiar, was not my own. Panic surged through me. My eyes snapped open, and the sight that greeted me made my breath catch. This was not my apartment. The room was sleek, modern, expensive. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow across the very naked torso of the man beside me. Luther. Luther. Shirtless. Asleep. In bed. With me. My heart slammed against my ribs. My body stiffened as fragmented memories from Friday night rushed in. The party, the drinks, the car, the kiss. Oh God, the kiss. Had we? No. No, no, no. I shot up in bed, only to groan when the movement sent a dull ache through my body. My dress from that night was nowhere in sight. Instead, I was wearing a large dress shirt, Luther's shirt. I exhaled sharply. Okay. So, we hadn't done that. But what the hell happened? Before I could spiral any further, a deep voice interrupted my thoughts. Morning, sunshine. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned to find Luther very much awake, his dark eyes filled with amusement. His voice was hoarse from sleep, his hair deliciously messy in a way that should not have looked that good. I scrambled to sit up. What am I doing here? Luther stretched, completely at ease. You tell me. I gaped at him. I don't remember. Oh, I do, he cut in smoothly. You were pretty insistent that I take you home. To my home, apparently. I blinked. I did not. You did, he said, smirking. You were very persuasive. Oh, God. I covered my face with my hands. Kill me now. Luther chuckled. Tempting, but then who would make my life interesting? I dropped my hands and glared at him. I need to leave. Go ahead, he said lazily. But just so you know, he tilted his head, mischief glinting in his eyes. This changes everything. I frowned. Nothing changes. Luther smiled, slow and knowing. Oh, Monica. He leaned closer, his voice a teasing whisper. We both know that's a lie. I had never wanted to throw something at someone more than I did in that moment. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Monday morning arrives back to reality. Walking into the office after a weekend of avoidance was stressful. I had spent all of Sunday convincing myself that nothing had changed, that I could face Luther like I always had. Then I saw him. He was standing near the conference room, talking to some executives, but the moment his eyes found mine, that damn smirk appeared again. I turned on my heel and walked the other way. Too bad he had other plans. "Monica," his voice called out, way too loud for my liking. I sighed, spinning around. "Yes, General Manager." I emphasized his title, hoping to remind him that this was a workplace. Luther didn't take the hint. He sauntered over, hands in his pockets, leaning in just a little too close. "You look tired. Rough weekend?" I gritted my teeth. "Not at all. Slept like a baby." He chuckled. "That's funny. Because last I checked, you were." I elbowed him hard in the ribs, cutting off whatever embarrassing thing he was about to say. His laughter only grew. Violence already? And here I thought we bonded. I exhaled sharply. "Listen, whatever happened on Friday was a mistake. A moment of weakness." Luther tapped his chin, pretending to think. "A moment? Monica, that was hours of weakness." I covered my face with my hands. "Kill me now." Luther leaned in, voice dropping to a teasing whisper. "Oh no, sweetheart. We're just getting started." I glared at him. "We are not doing this." He grinned. "You sure? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you can't stop thinking about it." I turned on my heel and marched away, determined not to let him win. But the problem was, he wasn't wrong. And that terrified me. Chapter 6. Monday was already a nightmare. Luther had spent the entire day hovering around me at work, his smirk practically glued to his face. Every time I turned a corner, there he was, leaning against my office door, whistling like he had no care in the world. "I hope you're feeling well rested after the weekend," he'd said that morning, way too smug. I had ignored him. Pretended I didn't hear him. Because acknowledging anything that happened would give him power. But oh, he didn't let up. During meetings, he made pointed comments about team bonding and how some people go from fierce enemies to unexpectedly close overnight. And at lunch, when I was about to sit down, he stole the chair next to me before anyone else could. "Monica," he drawled, resting his chin on his hand. "Do you feel guilty? Avoiding me like this?" I'd clenched my jaw and stabbed my salad. "I'm not avoiding you." He'd grinned. "Oh, sweetheart. You absolutely are." I had nearly poured my coffee on him. Then, I got a message from my mother that afternoon saying, "Mom, dinner tomorrow night. Fancy restaurant. Dress nicely." That was it. No details, no explanation. Just instructions. I frowned at my phone, suspicion creeping in. My family wasn't exactly the type to do spontaneous fancy dinners. My mother especially. She was calculating. If she was calling for a formal dinner on a Tuesday of all days, something was up. Still, I had no excuse to say no. So, after work on Tuesday, I reluctantly swapped my usual corporate wear for a more elegant navy blue dress, smoothed my hair, and called a cab. Little did I know, I was walking straight into an ambush. Because the trap was already set. The grand reveal. The restaurant was one of those ridiculously expensive places with crystal chandeliers. The place was way too romantic for a casual family dinner. Dim lighting, crystal chandeliers, soft violin music, it screamed date night. By the time I arrived at the restaurant, something already felt off. As I walked in, my suspicion tripled. Then I saw him. Luther. Sitting at the same table as my parents and his father. Smirking. I froze in the entrance, my entire body going stiff. For a solid 5 seconds, my brain refused to process the sight before me. No. No, no, no. My soul left my body. Luther raised his wine glass. "Fancy seeing you here, Monica." I walked towards them and turned to my mother, voice dangerously calm. "Mom, what is this?" She waved me off like I was overreacting. "Oh, darling, don't be so dramatic. It's just a little dinner." Luther's father clapped a hand on his son's shoulder. "We've been meaning to arrange this for a while now." My stomach plummeted. Arrange? I turned back to Luther, who looked annoyingly unbothered. I whipped my head toward Luther, glaring daggers. Did you know about this? I hissed. He shrugged, clearly enjoying this way too much. Nope. Got tricked just like you 20 minutes ago. I turned back to my parents, glaring. This is a setup, isn't it? My mother sipped her wine, avoiding eye contact. Setup is such a strong word. Luther chuckled under his breath. I whipped my head toward him. What's so funny? His damn smirk widened. I mean, it's cute that you thought you could escape this. Escape what? My voice came out sharp. Our engagement. The entire restaurant might as well have gone silent. I choked. Excuse me. Luther's father, Mr. Lawrence Blackwood, let out a hearty laugh. Now. It's not a trick. Just an arranged introduction. As he leaned forward, our families have always been close. It only made sense to arrange a future for you both. I stared, horrified. You're saying this has been planned for? My mother smiled innocently. Since you were teenagers, dear. I nearly fell out of my chair. My entire body locked up. No. Luther just leaned back, looking annoyingly smug. Well, Monica, it looks like we're meant to be. I lunged for the butter knife. My mother cleared her throat. Monica, don't make a scene. I took a deep, shaky breath. So, you're telling me that, all this time, you planned for me to marry him? Luther rested his chin on his hand. I'm flattered by how insulted you sound. I turned back to my parents. And what if I don't agree? Luther's father laughed. Oh, you'll warm up to the idea. I looked at Luther. He looked way too entertained. I swiveled toward him. Why are you laughing? His blue eyes twinkled with amusement. Because your reaction is even better than I imagined. I clenched my fists. You imagined this? Of course, he said smoothly. You think our parents haven't been trying to set this up for years? Wait. Years? I turned to my parents but my mom in horror. This is not the first time. Mom took a sip of wine, avoiding eye contact. Not exactly. Oh, I was going to lose my mind. Luther, the absolute menace, leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. So, Monica, since we're apparently betrothed, should we order the wedding cake now or later? I jabbed a finger at him. Don't you dare say anything. He raised his hands in surrender. I wouldn't dream of it. I picked up the nearest butter knife and pointed it at him. Don't test me. His lips tugged into a lazy grin. What? Afraid our undeniable chemistry might actually work in our favor. My mother perked up. Wait, undeniable chemistry? What's this? I froze. Luther's smirk widened. This bastard. Oh, just an inside joke, he said casually, shooting me a sideways glance. Monica and I had a very eventful weekend. My face burst into flames. Then, under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. But we both know we already crossed that line, sweetheart. I kicked him under the table. His jaw tightened slightly, but otherwise, the bastard didn't even flinch. Dinner was pure torture. Our families had a blast, talking about potential wedding venues and family legacies, while I sat there, slowly dying inside. Luther. Oh, he was having the time of his life. Throwing in comments like, you know, Monica is very affectionate once you get past her icy exterior. Or, we already share a deep connection. I wanted to murder him. By the time dessert came, I was plotting my escape. That was when my mother dropped the bomb. Well, since you two get along so well, we'll start discussing engagement dates. I choked. What? Luther. Oh, he just tilted his head and said, completely serious. Sounds good to me. I slammed my fork down. This was an actual nightmare. Outside the restaurant. The moment we stepped outside, I whirled on Luther. What the hell was that? He stuffed his hands in his pockets, looking far too amused. Which part? The part where you agreed. He shrugged. Well, you have to admit, it's entertaining. I exhaled sharply. We are not getting married. His eyes glinted. You sound awfully sure about that. I glared. Because I am. Luther took a step closer, his voice low and teasing. Then why are you blushing? I stepped back instantly. I'm not. You are. I'm just angry. Sure. I clenched my fists. You are the most insufferable man on this planet. Luther leaned in, his voice dropping an octave. Then why, he murmured, do you keep ending up in my arms? I froze. His words hung in the air, heavy and charged. I opened my mouth. Closed it. I had nothing. Luther just smirked. Knew he had won. I narrowed my eyes. What are you suggesting? Luther took a step closer, his gaze challenging. Let's play along. Let's see how far our families are willing to go with this. And in the meantime, he leaned in slightly. I get to keep teasing you. Luther smirked. We'll see about that. Then, without warning, he reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was fleeting, but it lingered. Good night, fiancé, he murmured before turning and walking away. I stood there, heart pounding, mind spinning. And one undeniable thought sinking in. I was in trouble. Chapter 7. Last week was horrible, but now Monday morning was already exhausting. I barely had time to recover from the nightmare dinner setup when the next unexpected problem entered my life, Luther's little sister. The first sign of trouble appeared in the form of an uninvited guest bursting into my office Monday morning, with a mission. Monica! I barely looked up from my laptop before a whirlwind of energy crashed into my desk. Monica, Monica, Monica. I blinked. Luther's little sister. Emily. A tiny hurricane in high heels. I sighed, closing my laptop slowly. A blur of excitement rushed in, arms flailing. I barely had time to react before a petite young woman practically tackled me in a hug. My brain short-circuited. What the? She pulled back, grinning like I was a celebrity. I can't believe I'm finally meeting you. I blinked. You know who I am. She giggled. Of course I do. I'm Emily, Luther's younger sister. And you're the Monica. Something about the way she said it gave me pause. I crossed my arms. What exactly do you mean by the Monica? She wiggled her eyebrows. The woman who has been tormenting my brother for years. I blinked. Excuse me. She hopped onto the couch in my office, kicking her feet. Oh, Monica. You have no idea how much I admire you. You're the first woman in history to make my emotionally constipated brother lose his cool. I snorted. That's not hard. He's annoying enough to make anyone lose their cool. She laughed. True, but you've mastered it. I rubbed my temples. Why do I feel like I should be concerned? Emily leaned in, eyes sparkling. Because I need your help. Oh no. I became the love guru, against her will. I need dating advice. I froze mid-sip of my coffee. I stared at Emily. I beg your pardon. She clasped her hands. You have to help me. I shook my head. I really don't. But you're so good at handling men. I choked. Handling men. She nodded eagerly. You completely own my brother without even trying. I need to learn your ways. I groaned, setting my coffee down. Emily, what you're describing is not a technique. It's called being naturally irritated by your brother's existence. She pouted. But I want to make a guy fall at my feet. Teach me. I sighed. Okay, fine. Who's the victim? She blushed. His name is Leo. He's gorgeous, smart, and completely oblivious. I've tried everything to get his attention, but he only sees me as his cute little sister and friend. I rubbed my chin. All right, first lesson. Stop being cute. She gasped. What? Men don't fall for cute little sisters. I smirked. They fall for enigmatic women. Emily scribbled notes. How do I become enigmatic? I leaned forward. Rule number 1. Ignore him. She gasped in horror. Ignore him? But I want him to notice me. I smirked. And he won't notice you until you stop begging for his attention. She blinked. That actually makes sense. I nodded. Men chase what they can't have. If he thinks he already has you, where's the thrill? Emily looked like I just unlocked the secrets of the universe. I continued, getting into it now. Rule number 2, make him jealous. She leaned in. How? I smirked. Find another guy. Laugh at his jokes. Casually touch his arm. Make sure your guy sees it. Emily's eyes shone. This is gold. Rule number 3, confidence is everything. Walk in like you own the room. Like he's lucky to even breathe the same air as you. Emily scribbled furiously. Own the room. I grinned. You got it. She clutched her notes to her chest. Monica, you're a genius. I shrugged. I know. Just as Emily was memorizing her new rules of seduction, the office door swung open. And in walked Luther. His brows furrowed. What the hell is going on here? Emily beamed. I'm getting dating advice from Monica the love guru. Luther's face went blank. Then he slowly turned to me. The love guru. I sipped my coffee. I don't know what she's talking about. Emily clutched my arm. She's teaching me how to make Leo obsessed with me. Luther's entire body stiffened. Leo. Emily nodded innocently. The guy I like. A muscle ticked in Luther's jaw. I grinned. Oh, he's great. Smart, handsome, charming. I think Emily has great taste. Luther's face darkened. He turned to Emily. Absolutely not. She gasped. What? I don't approve. Emily stood up dramatically. You're not my father. Luther crossed his arms. I might as well be. Emily groaned. You ruin everything. I chuckled. Wow, Luther. You're really playing the overprotective big brother role hard. He glared at me. And you're actively ruining my sister. Emily stomped her foot. You're just mad because she's better at handling men than you are. I smirked. It's true. Luther narrowed his eyes. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I sipped my coffee. Immensely. Emily grabbed her notes and marched toward the door. I'm gonna go make Leo regret ever calling me cute. Luther groaned. Monica, look what you've done. I shrugged. She's got potential. He exhaled sharply. Then, suddenly, his gaze darkened. He took one slow step toward me. I should be worried about how well you understand men. I arched a brow. Why? His lips curved into a smirk. Because now I know exactly how you think. I froze. Realization dawned in his gaze. Oh, he murmured. So, that's why you were ignoring me this morning. I clenched my jaw. No idea what you're talking about. He took another lazy step forward. You were playing hard to get. I scoffed. Please. I was just avoiding your annoying presence. His smirk widened. Millimeter. I stepped back instinctively. Stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like you just figured out my entire strategy. Luther leaned in, voice dropping. So, if I ignored you. I gulped. Don't. And flirted with someone else. I clenched my fists. Luther, I swear to. Would you get jealous? I wanted to punch him. Instead, I shoved past him, ignoring the laughter in his voice. You're insufferable. And yet, his voice trailed after me. You keep playing my game, sweetheart. I didn't answer. Because damn it. He was right. Chapter 8. The decision to fake it. I didn't know what was worse, the dinner with the families, the awkward silence between Luther and me afterward, or the looming threat of what would happen next. It's one thing to fake something for a day or two, but this felt like it was going to be a lot more complicated than either of us could handle. Luther's mom, with her genuine joy, had practically pushed us together with a smile that almost made me want to run away and never come back. I mean, who wouldn't want to go from antagonistic co-workers to potentially married couple in a few months? But in that moment, the idea of having to live this charade with him, Luther, the very person who would send my blood pressure skyrocketing with a single glance, felt unbearable. So, what did I do? What any self-respecting woman in a relationship with a guy who hated her guts and she equally disliked would do. I made a deal. I can't handle the constant family pressure. But we both know we have to avoid the awkward fallout of rejecting our families outright, I said, looking at Luther across the table as if this was a casual business agreement. His eyes narrowed. You want us to pretend to date? I leaned back in my chair, fully aware of how absurd this situation was. Think about it. It'll be simple. We go through the motions. No one needs to know it's all just a joke. No more awkward dinners, no more blind dates, no more random engagements. Luther wasn't exactly a fan of this idea, but he also wasn't one to go against family tradition. He sighed heavily, his lips curling into a half smile. Fine, we'll fake it. But you have to keep your distance, Monica. I'm not going to let you turn this into some romantic comedy fantasy where I'm the one who falls for you. I crossed my arms. You're so dramatic. Relax. I'll keep it professional. If only I knew how unprofessional I would be in the next few weeks. The first date was a disaster. Luther and I were supposed to go to a family dinner at his place, and all I wanted was to survive the evening without creating a world-ending scene. But of course, fate had other plans. When I arrived, his mother greeted me like I was the second coming of Christ, beaming with joy as though her son had finally come to his senses. Luther's dad, an imposing figure who somehow managed to look both like an authority figure and a teddy bear, clasped my hand firmly, clearly pleased to see his son bringing a girlfriend around. Welcome to the family, Monica, he said, a twinkle in his eye. I smiled stiffly, forcing myself to ignore the way my stomach flipped. Luther, on the other hand, was playing the part of the reluctant suitor far too convincingly. He slouched in his chair like someone who'd been sentenced to a life sentence in family hell, only speaking when absolutely necessary. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. Great to have you here, Monica, his younger sister said, giving me a knowing look. Yeah, we're all so glad you and Luther are finally getting serious. What's the secret? Is he treating you well? I swallowed hard. Oh, just the usual. Luther snorted, and I shot him a glare so deadly it could have killed a small army. He smirked back at me, clearly enjoying every moment of this ridiculous charade. But as the night wore on, I realized something. I wasn't as good at pretending as I thought I was. There were moments, small, subtle moments, when Luther's gaze lingered on me a second too long. His smile wasn't as forced as it had been earlier. The way he caught my eye across the table made my pulse race in ways I couldn't ignore. By the time dessert was served, I was a mess inside. I couldn't understand it. This was all fake. There was no reason for me to feel anything beyond the fact that this was all an elaborate lie. And yet, here I was, staring at him as though I was trying to read the answers to a test I hadn't studied for. The next few weeks didn't help. As part of our fake dating agreement, we were forced into several activities together, all designed to make us look like the perfect couple. Family dinners, movie nights, vacations. All of it felt more like an elaborate performance than actual relationship building. But as the days went on, I started to notice something strange. Luther and I, who had once exchanged nothing but sarcasm and insults, were now navigating this weird in-between space where our conversations weren't just about our families or work. We actually started talking about things that mattered, the little details we'd never bothered to share before. Take that family vacation for instance. We were stuck together on a weekend getaway that Luther's family had arranged. At first, it was just another grueling performance, but somewhere along the way, something changed. We ended up on a boat ride, sitting side by side as the wind whipped through our hair, and I caught a glimpse of him looking at me out of the corner of my eye. He wasn't smirking, wasn't teasing me, he was just looking. I turned to him, my voice suddenly soft. What's with the serious look? He shrugged, but there was something in his eyes that told me he wasn't sure how to answer. Just trying to figure you out, I guess. You've been different lately. Different how? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. You're not as cold. You're not just throwing insults at me anymore. I rolled my eyes. It's all part of the fake dating charade, remember? He chuckled. Yeah, right. So, what happens if this whole thing ends and we go back to our old ways? Are we gonna go back to pretending to hate each other? The question caught me off guard. I looked away, staring out at the water. I don't know. I guess we'll just figure it out. The rest of the ride was quiet, but there was a shift in the air between us. A small but undeniable shift. That night, Luther and I found ourselves at the hotel bar, nursing drinks we didn't really want. We'd had a heated argument about something completely ridiculous, something about which ice cream flavor was superior, and it somehow led us to this intimate, almost comforting silence. As we sat there, I couldn't help but wonder, was this really fake? By the time we returned to the office, things had definitely shifted between us. It wasn't just the forced dinner or the vacation that had changed things. It was the way our fake dating started to feel more real than I ever anticipated. When we bumped into each other in the hallway, it wasn't the usual awkwardness anymore. There was something else, an invisible thread tugging at both of us. I caught him watching me as I walked past, his eyes lingering a little longer than was normal. When our families called again to check on us, we played our roles perfectly, exchanging polite, nonchalant smiles that hid a growing tension. We kept up the act, dinners, meetings, even family events, but with each passing day, the chemistry between us became undeniable. The playful teasing that used to feel like mockery now felt like something else, something softer, something dangerously real. I wanted to resist it. I wanted to slap myself for letting it get to me. But as our fake dating continued, I realized that pride wasn't the only thing holding me back. It was the fear of what this would mean for both of us. After all, fake dating wasn't supposed to end with either of us having feelings for each other. It was supposed to be a way to keep our families happy, nothing more. But then, as I caught Luther looking at me with that small, almost wistful smile, I wondered, was this really fake anymore? Chapter 9. I always thought if Luther and I ever fell for each other, it would be the result of a head injury or some sort of mass delusion caused by an airborne virus. But apparently, the universe had other plans. It started innocently enough, with us still pretending to date for the sake of our families. But somewhere between the forced hand-holding and the awkward dinner conversations, something changed. It wasn't just the lingering glances or the fact that Luther's teasing no longer felt purely annoying. No, the real problem came when jealousy reared its ugly head. And let me tell you, jealous Luther? A menace. It happened at a company gala, a fancy event where we had to schmooze, shake hands, and pretend like we enjoyed mingling with people who only talked about stocks and tax loopholes. I had just managed to escape a conversation about synergy when he approached me. Brandon Hale. Young. Handsome. Annoyingly charming. The kind of guy whose smile could sell air to a drowning man. Monica, right? He asked, handing me a glass of champagne. I've heard a lot about you. I smirked, sipping the drink. All good things, I hope. Mostly. Though someone mentioned you have a habit of making grown men cry. I pretended to gasp. Slander. I would never. They cry of their own free will. Brandon laughed, clearly intrigued. I like a woman who knows her worth. I don't suppose you'd be interested in dinner sometime? Strictly professional, of course. Now, I could have handled this like an adult. I could have politely declined or said I'd think about it. But before I could respond, Luther materialized out of nowhere like an overprotective ghost. She's busy, he said, wrapping an arm casually, but not really, around my waist. Brandon raised an eyebrow. Oh? And you are? Luther gave him a smile so polite it was terrifying. The boyfriend. I choked on my drink. Excuse me? Brandon chuckled. Boyfriend, huh? Funny, I could have sworn I saw you glaring at each other across the room 5 minutes ago. That's our thing, Luther said smoothly. Passion. Keeps the relationship alive. Brandon gave me a questioning look, clearly waiting for me to contradict Luther's claim. I couldn't speak. Not because I was stunned by Luther's possessiveness, which I totally was, but because his hand was still on my waist, burning through my dress like it had a personal vendetta. Brandon shrugged, backing off. Well, lucky guy. Let me know if you ever get tired of passion. And just like that, he walked away. I turned to Luther, incredulous. What the hell was that? He picked up his drink and took a casual sip. What? You look like you needed saving. From what? A nice conversation. His eyes flicked toward Brandon across the room. From bad decisions. Oh, this man. This infuriating, gorgeous man. Are you jealous? I accused, narrowing my eyes. Luther scoffed. Jealous? Of him? Please. I just didn't want you embarrassing yourself by going out with a guy who probably talks about crypto over dinner. I took a deep breath, willing myself not to throw my champagne at his face. You're insufferable. He grinned. And you love it. The worst part? I kind of did. After that, things escalated. It was little things at first, like the way Luther's eyes would linger on me when he thought I wasn't looking. Or how he suddenly found reasons to be near me more often than before. There was a particularly dangerous moment at work when I dropped my pen and bent down to grab it, only to bump into Luther, who had done the same thing. We froze. Our faces were inches apart, his breath warm against my cheek. I could hear my own heartbeat roaring in my ears. Are we about to have a Disney moment? I whispered. Luther's lips twitched. If we were, there'd be dramatic music playing right now. I scrambled backward like I had been burned, gripping the edge of my desk. That was unnecessary. Totally, he agreed. But the way he was smirking told me he didn't regret a second of it. The accidental moments didn't stop there. One night, as we were leaving work together, I muttered under my breath, God, I hate how much I like being around you sometimes. Luther froze mid-step. What was that? My soul left my body. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Forget it. But it was too late. Luther grinned, stepping closer. Monica, did you just admit you like me? I backed away. No. I said I hate it. That's different. His smirk deepened. Still means you like me. Shut up, Luther. Of course, things were going too well, so the universe decided to ruin my life. A week after the gala, I walked into the office only to be greeted by the worst sight imaginable. Brandon, standing by my desk, holding a cup of coffee. Morning, Monica, he said smoothly, handing it to me. Before I could even respond, I heard a familiar, very displeased voice from behind me. Well, isn't this cute? I turned to find Luther standing there, arms crossed, looking like he was about to fire someone for sport. Brandon chuckled. Relax, man. It's just coffee. Luther smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the I'm about to commit a crime smile. Right. Just coffee, Luther echoed, stepping closer. And let me guess, the dinner invitation is just business, too. Brandon raised an eyebrow. Actually, yes. It's a collaboration proposal. You should try not being so paranoid. I sighed, exasperated. Luther, can you not make everything about you? He turned to me, eyes flashing. Oh, my bad. I thought we were supposed to be fake dating, but here you are accepting coffee from another guy. It's coffee, not a marriage proposal. Luther scoffed. Yeah. Then why is he looking at you like he wants to whisk you away to Italy? Brandon, amused, took a step back. I'll leave you two to, whatever this is. And with that, he left. Luther turned to me, arms still crossed. I glared at him. You're unbelievable. You don't want me, but no one else can have me either. His jaw clenched. I never said I didn't want you. The air between us shifted. I swallowed hard, suddenly feeling like I was drowning in the intensity of his gaze. Luther. He stepped closer. I mean it, Monica. His voice was soft, but the weight of his words crushed me. I should have pushed him away. I should have laughed it off. But instead, I stood there, heart pounding, realizing that maybe, just maybe, we had stopped pretending a long time ago. Chapter 10. After everything that happened, the rivalry, the one-night drunken mistake, the family blind date disaster, and the ridiculous fake dating arrangement, I thought I had survived the worst of it. But nothing could have prepared me for Luther Blackwood showing up at my parent house with a bag of oranges and an attitude. It was a quiet Saturday evening, and I was enjoying a rare moment of peace, curled up in my favorite sweatpants. Then, my mother brightened up from the window. Oh, Monica, dear. Look who's here. I already had a bad feeling. I turned, and there he was, Luther Blackwood, standing on our doorstep, looking smug as ever. He held up a bag. Your mom said she needed oranges. I turned to my mother. Did you say you needed oranges? She looked at me with zero shame. Oh, did I? Maybe I did. This was a trap. And when Nikki, my childhood friend, showed up right after, the mood shifted dangerously fast. Nikki and I had been friends since college, but did Luther care about logic? Absolutely not. So, Nikki, Luther started, stirring his tea like a soap opera villain, how's the friendship going? Nikki blinked. Good. Luther gave the fakest smile. That's really great. Especially considering how close you two are. I sighed. Luther. Oh, don't mind me, he cut in, throwing an arm over the couch. I'm just curious. I mean, it's not like you've secretly liked each other for years or anything. Nikki laughed awkwardly. No. Luther hummed. Interesting. Because someone once told me that friends can secretly like each other for years. I was going to murder him. I grabbed his stupid collar, dragged him outside, and slammed the door behind us. What the hell is your problem? I hissed. Luther scoffed. I don't have a problem. Oh, really? I folded my arms. Because you're acting like a jealous idiot. He opened his mouth, hesitated, then ran a frustrated hand through his hair. Maybe because I think it's stupid that you're pretending he's just a friend. Because he is. Yeah. Well, I don't like it. Silence. Luther blinked, realizing what he just admitted. I blinked. Excuse me. He groaned. I mean. I held up a hand. No, let's rewind. You. Fine. He exhaled sharply. I've been in love with you for years. The world stopped. My mouth opened, then closed. Then it opened again. You've been in love with me. Luther groaned. Yes, Monica. For years, since our childhood days. What? I stared. And you always attack and called me annoying and headstrong instead of just saying that. He sighed. Okay, not my best moment. But I have always loved you. I asked, are you drunk or was your tea topped? He looked down shyly. Did I let him off easy? Absolutely not. This man had tormented me for years, challenged my authority at work, driven me to near insanity, and now, after calling me annoying and headstrong, he just expected me to accept his love confession like a romantic comedy heroine? Oh, hell no. I crossed my arms, staring him down like a CEO about to fire an incompetent intern. That's cute, Blackwood. But if you think you can just confess and call it a day, you have another thing coming. Luther raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I smirked. Prove it. His face went blank. Then his eye twitched. Oh, no. Oh, yes. Luther sighed, running a hand down his face. Monica, can we be normal for once? No. I smiled sweetly. And so, the ultimate challenge was born. The next morning, I strutted into the office, prepared to see him squirm. What I wasn't prepared for was him going full Shakespeare. Right in the middle of a company-wide meeting, he stood up, dramatically adjusted his suit, and tapped the mic like he was about to make an Oscars speech. Attention, everyone, he announced. I have a very important declaration to make. I froze mid-sip of my coffee. No. He ignored me and continued. I, Luther Blackwood, do solemnly swear that I have been tragically in love with Monica, the department head manager, for years. I have fought it. I have denied it. But now, I accept my fate. My coffee went down the wrong pipe. The entire room was silent for 0.2 seconds. Then, no freaking way. Someone yelled. Wait, so the enemiestolovers thing was real? Monica, girl, did you know about this? I was actively dying inside as Luther smirked at me. The devil. The actual devil. Then, as if things weren't bad enough, my traitorous assistant Carrie yelled, "Kiss her, boss." I was going to fire her. Did he stop there? Of course not. That evening, I got home to find a huge, obnoxious banner hanging from my apartment balcony. Monica, the love of my life, please go out with me. And if that wasn't humiliating enough, Luther was standing under it, holding a boombox over his head like a 90s rom-com idiot. I wanted to move to another country. I stormed towards him. What are you doing? Luther grinned. Being romantic. Are you swooning yet? I pointed at the banner. Do you realize my neighbors can see this? Good, he said cheerfully. That means they know I'm winning you over. I rubbed my temples. Luther, this is not a battle. Oh, but it is. He winked. And I'm going to win. Clearly, grand gestures weren't enough. So, I took things to the next level. That night, I sent him a text. Me, if you're serious, prove your loyalty. Wear something ridiculous to work. And this man, this insane, unhinged man, actually did it. Luther strolled into the office wearing a bright pink shirt with Monica's property written in bold letters. A ridiculous fluffy apron that said, Best Boyfriend in Training. A tiara. A freaking tiara. The office lost its collective mind. Oh my God, someone whispered. Sir, are you okay? A confused intern asked. Luther smirked at me. Satisfied, baby. I wanted to scream. Just when he thought he had survived, I delivered the final test. A spicy food challenge. Luther had always bragged about handling spicy food. So, naturally, I made him eat the hottest dish imaginable, a plate of Carolina Reaper wings. Come on, Blackwood, I smirked. Prove your love. He grinned like a fool. Piece of cake. One bite in, his entire soul left his body. His face turned red. His eyes watered. His soul was actively fighting for survival. He gasped for air. This is fine. 5 seconds later, he lunged for my water bottle. I snatched it away. Only men who truly love me get water. I hate you, he choked. Love you too, babe. After days of torture, I finally relented. He had proved himself. Okay, I sighed. Fine. You win, Blackwood. Luther grinned. So you admit you love me? I huffed. I didn't say that. He smirked. Monica. Fine. I snapped. Maybe I do. His grin was unbearable. Say it properly. I groaned. I love you, you absolute pain in the ass. He laughed, grabbing me by the waist. That's all I needed to hear. Then he kissed me. And damn it, it was worth every second of torment. So, while Luther was busy trying to prove his undying love for me with spicy food and ridiculous outfits, there was another little bomb about to drop at the family dinner table. And of course, it was thanks to none other than Luther's younger sister, Emily. Now, Emily wasn't exactly what you'd call shy or subtle. In fact, her approach to life could be best described as no holding back. And it turns out, she'd been secretly taking my dating advice, though she wouldn't admit it unless she was backed into a corner, which, let's face it, happened often. I had given her some unique tips over the past few weeks on how to handle a crush. Things like, if you want him to notice you, show him that you're the most important thing in the room. And if all else fails, grab his tie and make a statement. Clearly, Emily had decided to take the advice a little too seriously. It all started innocently enough. We were having a family dinner, Luther's parents, my parents, Emily, and of course, me. The evening had been filled with the usual chatter about family business, my ridiculous antics with Luther, and a lot of over-the-top romantic hints that were more painfully obvious than a glittering neon sign. Then, Emily spotted Leo, her longtime crush. Leo, of course, had been completely oblivious to the fact that Emily had been carrying a torch for him since forever. He was just over there, being all cute and clueless, sipping his drink and trying to make small talk with the other guests. But Emily? Oh no. She wasn't about to let this opportunity slip. In the blink of an eye, Emily stood up, her chair scraping dramatically against the floor. She marched over to Leo, and without any hesitation, grabbed his tie, and I'm talking a full-on grip, like she was about to start a wrestling match. You like me, and I like you, she said, her voice booming across the table. So stop being a coward and take me on a date. The room went dead silent. I'm not sure what was more shocking, Emily's complete lack of subtlety or the fact that she just owned the room like a true drama queen. Leo's face went from pale to red in approximately 0.2 seconds. He stammered, his voice cracking under the pressure. I had to hold in my laughter as I watched the poor guy lose his ability to form coherent sentences. Meanwhile, Luther, who had clearly been pretending to ignore the chaos around him, groaned deeply and rubbed his face in exasperation. Oh God, not another one. I raised an eyebrow, smirking. You started this, Blackwood. The rest of the table was in shock, eyes darting between Emily, Leo, and me. I had to give Emily credit. She did not flinch. She stood there, hands still clutching his tie, staring at him like she was ready for him to make his move. Leo took a shaky step back, still bright red, completely flustered. I wasn't. Emily rolled her eyes. Quit stuttering, Leo, it's embarrassing. She straightened her shoulders and gave a small, satisfied nod. Take me on a date. You know you want to. At this point, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I let out a loud snort of laughter, and even Luther, who was clearly miserable, glanced up at the scene and couldn't help but let out a small chuckle. I'm not even surprised anymore, Luther muttered. After what felt like a lifetime of awkwardness, Leo finally managed to get his act together. Okay, fine, he blurted out, his face still flushed. I'll take you on a date, just, please let go of my tie. Emily released his tie with a mock pout, but there was a glimmer of victory in her eyes. Good. And make it somewhere fancy. And just like that, it was done. What was I thinking? So there I was, watching Luther's sister reel in her very own date while my own love life was filled with ridiculous public declarations and spicy food challenges. But as much as I hated to admit it, something about the way Emily just grabbed life by the tie, literally, made me feel a little proud. It was a mess, a total chaotic disaster, but it was hers. And it worked. Luther, now the official witness to his sister's unapologetically bold behavior, gave me a look. That could have been you. I rolled my eyes. Don't even start, Blackwood. But deep down, I couldn't help but laugh. Maybe love really did win. And maybe, just maybe, the Blackwood family had more than enough drama to go around. And as for Leo? Well, he finally got his first date with Emily, and from the looks of it, he wasn't going to be able to recover anytime soon. So, as the night wound down and Luther and I found ourselves alone again, I realized one very important thing. This was only the beginning. We still had a lot to figure out, but now, at least we had company. And Emily? She'd already set the bar for love, and it was set pretty high. But now that Luther had gotten that public confession off his chest, I couldn't help but wonder how he was going to top it all. Because, knowing him, he'd be out there making a dramatic scene at a coffee shop or something just to win me over. And if he did? Well, I'd be here for it. Okay, let's be real for a second. Question for you. What would you do if your sister grabbed her crush's tie, looked him dead in the eye, told him she liked him, and demanded a date, right there in front of the whole family? Would you cheer her on for having the guts to go after what she wants? Or would you sit there, silently judging, knowing deep down you'd never be that bold yourself? Be honest. Would you do this? If yes, hit subscribe. If not, well, guess courage isn't for everyone.